Delighted to welcome my first guest of this hour, Foreign Office Minister, Conservative MP James Cleverly. Good morning to you.
Julia, good morning.
Good morning. Let's talk about, well, one of the many topics that are on the agenda this morning. Of course, the Brexit deal or no deal. We don't know yet which way it's going to go. You were a keen Brexiteer, of course. Nigel Farage spoke to us a little bit earlier of the Brexit Party, now the Reform UK Party. He said his biggest fear is that there will be a deal and that Boris Johnson is going to sell us out. Given what the EU are demanding right now, is a deal any chance of being a good deal?
Absolutely. And the fact that this is going to the wire, the fact that we are negotiating very hard, David Frost and his team pushing hard on a small number of important issues that are still remaining, I think that should be demonstration to everybody that our team have been negotiating very hard. And actually, I don't know how this is going to play out over the next day or two. But we shouldn't be surprised that these negotiations are going to the wire. That tends to be the case with many negotiations, particularly with the EU. But we are making sure that we protect the interests of British people, British businesses and the sovereignty of the UK.
OK, but where are the compromises to be found? We know for a year or more now, the UK government and the EU have been on very much different playing fields when it comes to three issues: state aid in a level playing field, fishing rights and key issues of government. So who decides a dispute? Well, there's no basis on which we're going to accept the European Court of Justice effectively deciding if there's an area of dispute. There's no basis on which we can say, yes, of course the EU can have access to our fishing waters forever and a day, even though we're a national sovereign state. And there's no basis on which we can stick to EU rules on taxation and state aid and the like. Because what was the point of voting for Brexit in the first place? Where is the room for manoeuvre? Where is the room for compromise on all of this?
Well, I think I'm not in the room, so I don't know the detail of exactly what's being debated, what's being disagreed over, or where the flexibility on the EU's part may be. But you've raised a number of important points that we want to decide who does not fish in our waters. That doesn't mean to say that foreign fishing fleets will have no access to UK fishing waters, but we should decide. The UK should decide how much, for how long, at what cost. And that's not an unreasonable state of affairs. And I think if the EU can understand that all the UK is asking for are the same rights that any other third country negotiating a trade agreement would accept, that's when I think we can get movement. And look, we know it's tough. It might not play out today or over the next couple of days, in which case we are willing, not our preferred option, but we are willing to leave the transition period without a trade agreement. But I do hope that we can thrash one out.
OK. I think a lot of people say it is likely, and we often get a lot of drama at the end of these things. But there is still a lot of concern, even from Brexiteers like myself, who would be perfectly happy, philosophically, theoretically, with a no deal, but concerned that the government has not been preparing properly for the prospect of a no deal in terms of the actual preparations at the border, preparing companies. We've got a few lorry parks being built in Kent, but actually the supply lines not being looked at properly. We know that there's been a document that's been seen, this official sort of reasonable worst case scenario. OK, it's worst case scenario, but it does look like long delays for a few months at a time where we're in a global pandemic. Has the government taken its eye off the ball a bit too much?
Well, we've always known that an agreement is the preferred option. And you talk about that reasonable worst-case scenario document. That document, it's not a prediction. It's basically a document to stimulate and focus planning and preparations.
OK, did it stimulate focus, planning and work?
Absolutely. And so there's been a public information campaign, which I'm sure you will have seen, to help businesses prepare for when we leave the transition period. We've also allocated £700 million for enhanced border preparations to address those concerns about there being pinch points at the Dover-Calais crossing and other crossings. So we've been both as a government taking action ourselves and also ensuring that businesses and individuals take action. So we can avoid that worst case scenario, but ultimately what we would prefer is that those things become moot points because we get movement from the EU and we get an agreement over the line.
Now, I know every other interview this morning has been saying to you, oh, we were promised an oven-ready deal by the Prime Minister, but of course that was the withdrawal agreement for actually Brexiting.
Exactly.
So I'm not going to waste my listeners' valuable time with that nonsense, because it is just absolute nonsense. I remember what was said. I remember the context. However, it is fair to say that when there's going to be a lot of talk if we don't get a deal, that sort of, we're going to have an Australian-style deal. It's a choice between a Canada-style deal or an Australia-style deal. An Australia-style deal is, to all intents and purposes, a no deal. Is it not beholden on Cabinet and Foreign Office ministers and everyone else like you in the government to be honest with people and say, yes, if it is a no deal, we're going to call it what it is. It is a no deal. We're going to trade on World Trade Organization terms, as we do currently right now with huge number of countries around the world, including America, our biggest single as a nation trading partner. But can you promise me that you'll call it what it is?
Well, I think the reason that we use that language is because there were some people who were trying to create the illusion that if you don't have a trade agreement, you can do no trade. And the point we were trying to highlight is that, as you said, is a nonsense. Australia trades with the EU very successfully without a formal trade agreement. The US trades without a formal trade agreement. And what we wanted to show is that a trade agreement is preferable, but many, many countries trade very, very successfully with the EU without a formal trade agreement. We didn't want people to be conned or seduced by the idea that no trade agreement means no trade. And that's why we use that phraseology, so people understand better what the implications are.
Let's turn our attention to the vaccine that's being rolled out as of tomorrow. We're still obviously waiting for the huge numbers of vaccines to turn up, the 4 million doses that we've been told by the end of the year. There's a big logistical exercise to go ahead. We spoke to an expert in cold chain logistics earlier who said this is basically like a well-choreographed ballet. There are 80 different elements that need to be in place in each hospital, even for that. Are you confident that the government is going to roll this out well, given that we've had quite a few logistical problems with getting PPE to the frontline people who need it, protecting care homes, issues with test and trace? When it comes to making a big promise, the government's always there. When it comes to delivering the boring day-to-day, minute-by-minute practicalities, this government hasn't done very well so far.
Well, actually, the global response to coronavirus, we've all had to kind of learn on the job, because this is unprecedented. No country in the world has ever had to deal with this. And I would remind you that the National Health Service is one of the biggest organisations in the world, incredibly sophisticated but complicated entity. But we have learnt a huge amount through this pandemic, and actually the government has, I think, certainly on the vaccine side of things, been an absolute world leader. We are world leading not only in the development of one of the vaccines, but from the government's point of view, we've ensured we've bought vaccine doses across a range of vaccine providers to give ourselves the best spread. We're working very, very carefully with the Joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisations about what the prioritisation and the deployment plan will be. We've given a huge amount of thought for this. And actually, with things like testing, for example, we now have a better testing regime than Germany or Italy. We really are at the forefront now in terms of use of the vaccine. So I'm confident that we will actually deploy this well. OK,
let's hope these words don't come back to haunt you. Let's talk about the vaccine passports, though. We were told we wouldn't need vaccine passports. We won't need a certificate. We won't need to have access to get to that swab. We were told it wasn't one of the plans of the government to access basic services or gain access to places. We know, though, you're going to be given a card when you've had your vaccine, as you do for any vaccine that you have. You get a little card. There's going to be a national database of who has had this vaccine. A lot of people are very concerned, including me, that this is not going to be a compulsory vaccine, but basically if you don't get it, you're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to get on a plane, not going to be able to go to a football match, not be able to go to a theatre, go out to a restaurant, and effectively it is going to be compulsory in all but name. Can you guarantee that this is going to be a voluntary vaccine that no one, either indirectly or directly, will be forced to take?
Well, I think that the two elements, and you've highlighted it completely correctly. I do a lot of international travel because of my job. less than you'd normally expect, but I'm starting to travel now. And when I go to a country, they want to see that I've had my jabs. And that's fairly well established, and we've all got those cards. And so for international travel, this is a well-established element. For the things that you're saying about going to restaurants, going to football matches, that is absolutely not what this is about. My position, government's position rather, is that this is a really important vaccine, and we would encourage everybody to take it. That this will help, unlock the British economy whilst also protecting lives. So, we really, really do want people to do this, and we'll demonstrate that it is safe and effective. I will take it when it's my turn. My father, who's getting on now, is in his late 70s. He will take it. But I think there's a long-standing history of mandating vaccinations often can be counterproductive.
Okay.
But we do want.
You're not ruling it out, though.
To take it. Well, the thing is, so it is not going to be government policy, as Michael Gove made clear. It is not going to be government policy for that to be your ticket to a football match or a restaurant booking. And we would make sure that the private sector organisations understand that fully.
Okay.
For things like international travel.
That's a different matter. Yeah, I think, okay. Just finally, your colleague George Eustace, the Environment Secretary, yesterday defended the Millwall fans who booed their players who were taking the knee as part of the Black Lives Matter process, and which we've seen every single Premier League match since they returned. Do you agree with George Eustace that they've got every right to boo and express their views?
Now, I've not seen the footage directly, but that's not my understanding of what the point that George was looking to make. My understanding is that he was saying that the players should be respected, but he also went on to say, and I completely agree with him on this, that there are certain members within the Black Lives Matter movement that are trying to drag that into a very political and quite an extreme political area. Not the majority of the people who are showing solidarity with racism, certainly not the players. And I think it was absolutely wrong for the fans to boo the players who were just demonstrating their desire to...
Why was it wrong for them to express... If the players are allowed to express their views, why can't the fans express theirs? You don't have to agree with either.
Well, the point is that there's people make choices. People make choices, and if some of the fans, it certainly wasn't all of them, if some of the fans chose to boo, they've made that choice, and my choice is to criticise them for doing so. I think it's wrong that they did that. And if they're saying, "Oh, we weren't booing the fans, we were booing the agenda," it lays them very open for misinterpretation. So the point I'm saying is that I think it's wrong that they did so.
All right.
And I think it's fine if players want to demonstrate that they stand up to racism.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Foreign Office Minister James Cleverly.